Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. We are super excited that all of you want to learn more about the journal today. And I'm proud to say that the panelists that we have today are experts in this area. So they will guide you through from beginning to end about what it takes to put a journal manuscript together. Again, my name is Camille Perlman. I work at the Hawaii Home Office. I am the managing editor for the Talking Stick, but I also get the pleasure of working with the Journal Board throughout the year. So let's get started. If I can move to the next slide here, we go. Our lovely panelists today are our current editor of the journal, Sarah Gordon, associate editors Denise Davidson, Jamie Penvin, and Carrie Smith. They will be guiding us through the steps of putting a manuscript together today. And I'm going to take care of a little housekeeping before we really dig into the rest of the slides today. We just want to make sure that everyone is aware that there are many ways to engage with the association, and we hope that you are taking advantage of all of them. So these are three options here, and we hope that you're connecting with your peers with any of these options, and of course just keeping tabs on what the association is doing. And if you miss a session, chances are that virtual session will be offered on our YouTube channel, so definitely take advantage of that. And again, some final housekeeping before we get going. Want to make everyone aware that this session is being recorded. Please use the chat function to introduce yourself, reintroduce yourself to friends and colleagues you see in our Brady Bunch squares today. There will be a chance for questions and answers at the end of the presentation. Please have your webcam on and your microphone muted. We love to see your wonderful faces, but the panelists would appreciate less background noise. That would be awesome. And yes, when you are speaking in the group, please make sure that you state where you're from. So with those housekeeping things taken care of, I'm going to pass the baton to Sarah Gordon, and she's going to get us started talking about learning outcomes for today.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Following Camille's guidelines, I am Sarah Gordon. I am the editor of the Journal for College and University Student Housing, and I am an associate professor at Arkansas Tech University. And yes, we are going to talk today about how to publish, and we're going to talk about several different things. We can see here on the slide different types of publications, but we're also going to talk specifically about the Akuho'ai Journal and helping you through the stages of writing and what it's like in our publication process. And I think in getting that idea of what it's like for our journal, you get a sense of what it's like for other journals if it turns out that this isn't the fit. So I will kick it to Carrie now, and we can get started with our first activity.
Thanks, Sarah. Hey, everyone. My name is Carrie Smith. I work at NYU in Res Life and Housing with our faculty programs, and I'm one of the associate editors. It wouldn't be a Housing and Res Life presentation without an activity and kicking it off. So we do want this to be interactive in a way to connect with folks and not only, as Sarah said, sort of learn about the journal and the process, but also give you time to sort of work through the different types of areas that we'll be covering. So for our first activity, Denise just shared a Padlet in the chat. If you want to open up that link, you'll notice that we've already pre-created groups. So there's space for you to add thoughts from each of these breakout groups. So we're going to put you into breakout groups in a second if you want to introduce yourself to one another. And for this first part, just brainstorm and list in the Padlet professional publications that come to mind, things you've read, things you've published in, things that you're interested in publishing. And we just sort of want to see where folks' heads are at for that. And when you go to the Padlet, you'll see professional publications is listed first under each of the groups. You can click on those three dots, it'll say edit, and you can type right in there. So let's do that activity. We'll come back in about 5 minutes or so.
Okay, we're going to break out into 4 different breakout rooms.
Awesome. Awesome. I was just apologizing to my group for, as I was taking notes in the tablet or in the Padlet, I hit enter and it kicked me out of our breakout room. So I did have our notes down, so they are there, and I won't do that again. So thank you for taking a minute to sort of brainstorm, what type of professional publications exist. I think it sort of helps us to frame this conversation as we start to think about writing for publication, thinking about where that's going to end up, right? Like, what are those different options? And this slide just provides kind of a brief overview of the different types of publications. And I think as I'm reading through the Padlet topics, definitely the publications that were listed fall into these different areas. And so you could argue this is sort of from less formal to more formal, right? So blogs is sort of a less formal process and way of publication, certainly has come up a lot over the past few years. There are newsletters and magazines. Many of those exist for regions, right? Or also for national organizations, peer-reviewed journals, which we will focus on today. And then, monographs, chapters, and books, which typically are more often by invitation. So being invited to write a chapter to a specific book or things like that. So it definitely runs the gamut in terms of how much review is involved, how much effort is involved in these different pieces. And so I think it's helpful to have that in mind as you're starting to think about where you want to publish or what you're writing for publication. And just calling out, I see in the Padlet, a lot of folks wrote the Journal of College Student Development. About Campus was mentioned a few times. JSARP, the Journal of Student Affairs Research and Practice from NASPA, so many acronyms. But then there's also more nuanced journals, right? The Journal of Women in Higher Education, Technology in Higher Education, First Generation Student Success. So there really are a ton of publications out there. And so hopefully that'll help us as we go through our next activities to think about potentially where you might want to direct your energy. So we'll shift to the next slide. So, and thanks, Denise, absolutely. Your college university library databases are great sources for finding other publications. So, as you start this process, right, sort of the first piece is to think about questions to help you identify potential topics that you want to focus on. And these are just some general prompts to get you started, but, thinking about where does your professional passion lie, right? And is that really something that you want to focus on for writing? Have you presented at conferences before, and can you translate that into an article, a manuscript, a blog? Did you write a master's thesis or dissertation? I know I did, and I'm still working on, smushing that 150-page document into a 20-page article. But that's a great place, right? You've already sort of done that work and that research and translating that into an article or manuscript. Are you involved in assessment or analysis, whether through professional organizations or at your institution? Do you offer a new perspective on a topic that you feel like is missing from the general conversation from what you've seen? Are you a go-to person for anything? I know a lot of us probably are at our institutions. And so what is that topic that you could add to the conversation? Is there an area you'd like to become an expert? So this is often, your opportunity to dig in and dive in and do some research, whether again, it's for something related to your professional work, something related to a dissertation, or just something that you're passionate about. And then is there anything happening on your campus, right, that you feel like you can contribute, whether it's a best practice or a conversation about a challenge, things that are coming up? So these are just some general prompts to think about as you're trying to narrow in and identify a topic to publish on. I see folks are still adding into the Padlet, which is great. So, and thanks, Sharmila, no worries that you have to pop out. So our next piece is going back into our breakout rooms. I promise I won't kick myself out of ours. And using that same Padlet, spend some time sharing in your breakout rooms what are some potential topics that you are interested in publishing on. And this doesn't mean that you're ready to, it doesn't mean that you have something ready to go, but to start thinking about, okay, what is it I'm really passionate about? So we'll take about 5 minutes or so to do that, and then we'll come back to the main room. Thank you all for participating in our second quick breakout. I see a lot of great topics being added to the Padlet, and so feel free to browse through them to get inspiration for other ideas as you're reflecting on what you'd like to write about. And we just wanted to share quickly, I'll wrap up my time just hearing the perspective from an author's voice. So this is from Danielle Twigg from Griffith University, who was the 2014 Manuscript of the Year recipient. And she shared, take a chance and take advice. Not all review teams provide detailed feedback, but if they happen to take an interest in your work, treat the feedback like gold. Use the feedback from experts to build upon your own work. You will learn a lot in the process, and the article will shine as a result. And feedback can be hard, right? Especially when you've put your heart and soul into this paper, this manuscript, but really, I think knowing that it is all meant to make this article the best that it can be, make this manuscript the best it could be. So really valuing that and working with that. And so now I believe that I am turning it over to Jamie.
Yes. So hello, I'm so glad you all took time out of your day to attend the session. My name is Jamie Penman. I serve as Director of Living and Learning Programs at Virginia Tech. And so in thinking about starting that process, choosing your topic is a logical place to start. But it needs to be something that is of interest to you, or that that really is sort of helps in that motivation factor. But the other piece of that is that it needs to be pertinent to the field of student affairs. And so, you might be really passionate about school bus transportation, but higher ed folks may not be as interested in that. And so you need to find that marriage. And if something's overwritten about, you want to move on and maybe find a different angle on that. It is really important, and I can't emphasize this enough, develop a purpose statement and stick to it and revisit it frequently and often, because we sometimes have a tendency to stray. And so keep on that purpose statement, and that helps keep you directed. Make sure that you're familiar with the existing literature that's out there and what's been written, because what you're trying to present yourself is as an expert. You can't be an expert if you don't know what other folks have been writing about. So make sure you pay attention to that. And then it's thinking about, as far as there's a variety of ways, as far as whether it's a research article, a book review, but you need to think about the type of publication that you are wanting as far as what you're writing. But then going along with that is, where is it most pertinent for you to try to be published? And so, for instance, About Campus is a very different publication than, say, the Journal of College Student and University Housing, or the Journal of College Student Development. You're not going to see a reference list that goes on for pages with About Campus. That's not the style of it. So you need to understand the style of that publication. And then in there, make sure that you know as far as what their expectations are for how you go about that process. Think about your audience. And so, for our journal, I would say we're heavy on the practitioner end. So lots of folks within housing are reviewing the journal. You may not get as many faculty that are reviewing the journal. And so think about the people that are reading that journal as your audience. There's lots of other steps here, as far as if you're doing a study, you need to make sure you go through your institutional research board and familiarize yourself with that process. It's always a good idea, even if you're just sort of curious and you're doing a study you don't intend to publish, go ahead and get IRB approval, because you never know when that opportunity presents itself. And then just start going about your study, as far as if you're doing a study, collecting your data and those types of things. And then I talked earlier on, but revisit your purpose statements, because if you find that you're drifting from your purpose statement, then you might need to go and make some revisions earlier on your manuscript. And then it's about, as far as once you've finished that process, as far as, then you get more into the cleaning up and getting ready to submit for publication. We can go to the next slide. And so, with the content that you have within your article, as far as, I talked earlier about you wanting to present yourself as an expert. And so part of that is you being able to articulate how your topic is relevant or significant to the field itself. And so in doing that, one of the things that you knew in being familiar with the literature is talking about where those, where it fits within the existing literature. I will tell you one of my biases, or not necessarily a pet peeve, but is that when I'll get an article to review and there's literature in there that is like 20, 30 years old, and it's not salient. It's not like the, it's not Nevitt Sanford's original publication, but it's an article that was written 30 or 40 years ago. Find the relevant information. Help your reader in their transitions. It's okay to be very clear as far as, like, we've discussed it. You aren't going to say it this way, but we've discussed this. Now we're going to move to this area, but think about transitions so that it's a smooth ride for your reader and not a bumpy jarring where they're kind of wondering, how did we get to this point? It should be very clear for them how they've got from point A to point B to point C. I talked about making sure that your purpose statement drives your study, and so your conclusion should relate back to that particular purpose statement. The other piece that I would say is that I had a faculty member who said, tell the reader what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. So when you think about your article, you tell them what you're going to tell them, you tell them, and then you tell them what you told them. We're not reading a suspense novel. So it's okay for you to be able to tell them what you're going to be telling them later on in the article. But keep that in mind as far as if you don't remember anything, write a clear purpose statement, refer to it frequently and often, and then tell them what you were going to tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you're going to tell them. And we can go to the next slide. And so in the chat, what I'd like you to do, and I'm going to get some help from my colleagues monitoring chat, as far as sharing the characteristics of high quality writing. So from your perspective, when you're reading an article, what are the things that demonstrate strong writing? But don't everyone type at once. Yes, so clear organization of thoughts and ideas. It's really important as far as for you, because if you're not clear, your reader's not going to be clear. And I see a number of folks have talked about clarity and consciousness. Alfredo, my faculty member, would love you. I never got away with saying anything. I always had to cite. And so part of it in that command of the literature is that for you to be able to cite resources that demonstrate what you're talking about. Yeah, I think the reader, if they leave with more questions about your topic that are prompted by because of your study versus they're now curious, curiosity is a great thing. But you don't want to leave them just sort of like, what did I just read? Well, I didn't understand that. One of the things that I also recognize is for some folks is that they will be conversational in their writing. Or first-time authors, you don't want to be conversational. You do want to be professional in that. And then Denise popped in there, active voice. It wasn't until probably, I don't know, like 3 drafts in of my dissertation where I finally was really getting expert voice and being active in that voice, because it once again, it demonstrates a command of the topical area. And so we are now going to transition.
Hi, Denise Davidson. I'm an associate professor at Bloomsburg University of Pennsylvania in our College Student Affairs graduate program. And as I shared with my group, I had a prior life as a residence life practitioner. I've served as an associate editor now for 6 or 7 years. And I'll share that I've been both a reviewer, associate editor, I've been an author, and I have been a co-editor of a special topics issue. So please know that there are multiple ways for you to be involved in the journal. And we value all of the folks who volunteer to help this publication. I think when it comes to general attributes of good, strong writing, Jamie spoke to much of this as well as the items in the chat. Much of it is about being direct and explicit in your writing. What I see sometimes is that authors have made some assumptions about what readers know. So it's better to put that in, and you can always take it out if it's a little too simplistic, but make sure that you're speaking and writing to somebody who might not know and might not have the same expertise that you do, since you've been delving into particular literature and you're the expert on your study. Jamie said this before as well, but being attentive to what it is the journal is looking for is really important. I've seen a few pieces, not very many, come through, and I'm thinking, I don't know that this is really for us. It might not actually hit on multiple types of readership of the journal. Super important to follow the conventional style that the journal uses. For us, it's APA, and we're using APA 7. So show that you are, this is gonna sound kind of odd, but that you respect the reviewer's time, that you have paid attention to what it is that we're asking for in terms of how you're formatting your paper and citation format, those sorts of things. Proofread carefully. It turns reviewers off. Whether that has to do with the quality of your content or not, it is something that frustrates reviewers for sure. So submit as clean a copy as you possibly can. I'll also point out that for the journal, at least, the copy editing that is done is actually done by a volunteer. So we're really volunteer driven. So that's why we put a good amount of expectation on our authors to work with us to make sure that APA and formatting and all the other deviations that we might have from APA are also paid attention to. Next slide, please. When we're talking about the analysis and discussion section, we again want you to be clear and organized. Don't avoid areas that you might feel like your paper is a little bit weaker in. I learned this in my dissertation work when I was trying to use a particular statistical procedure, and because I had gotten my data from another source, I was trying to benchmark against that, and they were not able to share that information with me. And I spent a lot of time trying to find ways of doing what I wanted to do with the statistical procedure, and ultimately had to write in there, wasn't possible to do this, even though that's what I had thought I could do from the beginning. So if you have an instrument, for example, that you're using and the validity evidence isn't all that great, maybe it's a weaker instrument, but it's all that was available. Don't avoid including that information about validity. Include it and describe what you did to try and counteract that, so that the information's there as opposed to hiding something, right, by omission rather than being straightforward. Jamie mentioned this also, that we're a practitioner-oriented journal. I encourage authors to think broadly about that audience, because it's not just residence life folks. It's housing operations, it's construction and renovation, it's facilities people. It is also sometimes dining folks. So think about that broadly, and then make sure that you have a good, strong implications section in your article or in your piece, because that's very much where our practitioners get the meat of what it is that's being presented to them in the journal. So don't skimp on that. And again, know your publications audience. Next slide. So I have a work husband. He is also my scholarship husband. We have, his name is Mark Bauman. He's a faculty member here. I'll give him credit. We have presented together. We have done workshops. We have written. We have edited. We have done all sorts of things together. Now, it took a paper or two, right, for us to figure out exactly what our particular styles were and what our strengths and weaknesses are. But You can collaborate with other people, particularly if you feel like, hey, I need somebody to help fill out what it is that I'm working on. Somebody else has some expertise maybe that I don't as the primary author. So the first thing is to know yourself, know your strengths and weaknesses, or where you feel confident, more or less confident. Communicate all the way through the process, from the very first time that you talk with someone and talk with them about collaborating. It doesn't have to be a, would you like to do this? Okay, good, you said yes. But more of a, who would be doing what, who would be responsible for various elements, what are each of your strengths and weaknesses. Asking yourself the question of who's driving the bus, who's the person in charge, who's going to be the first author, what does that include, what does it consist of? And then keeping in mind that you can collaborate with lots of different types of folks out there. It can be a faculty member, it can be another student affairs practitioner, it can be a grad student, somebody from your institution, somebody from somewhere else. Maybe it's somebody that you met at NHTI or that you met at the CHO conference, right? So it doesn't have to be someone necessarily that you have regular contact with. What we want you to do then is to also make sure that you are, and that's the next slide, sorry, that you spend time, as has been commented on, understanding the publication and recognizing that different publications may have different types of articles that they accept. The journal right now, the primarily for our two primary issues, those are research pieces. We do have a historical trends manuscript, which is more of an essay. It is not original empirical research. Some journals have point of view columns or just general commentary. The Journal of College Student Development has their research section as well as a research in brief. So those are shorter pieces. Some journals also have media reviews of media of all kinds. So remember that you can not only write for different kinds of publications, but there may be different options for you within a specific publication. Understanding the journal's peer review process will really help you out moving forward. I think it can be really frustrating. I've been on this end, right? As an author, you submit something and it seems to go into this black hole. Sometimes that's a lack of knowledge on my part as the author, that I didn't recognize that the average turnaround time is 3 months, 6 months, whatever it may be. I also recommend that you go ahead and reach out to the editorial group, whatever that might be. If you submit something and you don't hear something back in the timeline that is published on their website, or perhaps you have an email recognizing submission or acknowledging submission, and they don't follow through, by all means reach out. I had something that sat for a year at not the Journal of College University Student Housing, but a different journal. It sat for a year with nobody working on it. I had another submission that in a 7-month time period, the editor-in-chief turned over 3 times. And so they lost track of my manuscript because they did not have good transition going on. So don't be shy about saying, hey, they said I should know in about this much time. I've heard nothing. Go ahead and inquire. There could be all sorts of reasons that they haven't gotten back to you. If you're looking at a journal or any kind of publication, you're thinking, I don't know if this fits. I have this paper I'm working on. It seems like it fits for this journal, but let me just double check. You can ask the editor. You can find out from them if they think that it's worth your time to orient your paper specifically towards that publication or not. Sometimes there are also, and we aren't always aware of this, but sometimes there are topics that have been done and redone. And so it is useful for you to know the publication and look and see its past history, but also potentially to ask the journal editor to say, I'm thinking about something on living learning communities. Has this been done? Is this something that the journal would be open to? Right? Those are good questions to ask. So we're going to put you, sorry, last time I think here, we're going to put you back in your breakout rooms and ask you to think a little bit, talk a little bit about where you might need support in the whole writing publication process. What areas might you need more help with or more information about, or where you might need some mentorship? And then generate also some ideas about who those particular people or resources might be. So we'll take about 5 minutes for that and then come back to the main room. So one of the things I shared with our group is that although the Journal of College University Student Housing Editorial Board would we'd love to see a perfect manuscript come through and be able to stamp it and say, accept as is, that doesn't often happen. And we recognize that. We want to help your work become better. So please recognize that almost always there's going to be a revise and submit process. And we want to help your paper be something that is both publishable and of high quality and something that you can be proud of and that fits with where you started with it, right? A lot of what we'll give you will be writing kinds of changes, maybe some structural changes depending upon what you have submitted. But I think we're very much trying to maintain the integrity of what you have put together, but just making it better. I'm going to shift this over to Sarah, right? And she's going to talk about what comes next.
Yes. Well, and Denise kind of touched on this just now, but we have on this next slide the different outcomes that can happen. And this is pretty typical, not just for our journal, but for most journals. I don't know of anyone that deviates from this particular set of outcomes. But the two that I put arrows by, revise and resubmit or accept with minor revisions, are the most common for our journal. So just like Denise mentioned, an accept as is rare. I would also offer that an outright reject is also rare. It's something that we work really hard, and you don't have to switch slides yet, Camille, but on the next slide, we talk about our philosophy a little bit, and that is really to be developmental. So the particular outcomes, reject means that it won't be considered for further publication. So there are not any options at that point to resubmit to this journal. And that, again, that's not just our journal, it's pretty much any journal. A reject means this isn't the right outlet. Accept as is means we're going to go forward and publish it the way that it is. Revise and resubmit and accept with minor revisions really are pretty similar. The major difference is that an accept with minor revisions may not go back through the full and complete review process, whereas a revise and resubmit is going to go back through the entire process again. So you turn it in as an author, it's going to get assigned to reviewers who will review it, provide feedback. That feedback goes to the associate editor. The associate editor puts that feedback together and also reads and reviews themselves, puts all of that feedback together and sends it to the editor, who considers all of it for the next round. So revise, resubmit, you're going to go through all of that, as opposed to accept with minor revisions. We typically will see maybe just going through the associate editor and editor. The next slide is a quote from our own Denise, who's here, and you kind of heard her say this already, but the idea of this quote, I won't read it right to you, but the idea is, as she mentioned before, submit the cleanest manuscript you can. When there are grammatical mistakes, spelling errors, APA issues, formatting issues, not following the way the journal needs things submitted or organized, what happens is reviewers can get stuck in the weeds. Those things can keep them from being able to give you feedback on content, which is what you actually want. You want the feedback to make the whole article better. And in addition to that, it also bogs down the copy editor, like Denise already mentioned. So truly the best manuscript you can put forward for review, is what you need to put forward in order to get the feedback that you need that will actually strengthen the content of the article and make the article itself better. Finally, we our philosophy as a journal, JCUSH, as we call ourselves, the Journal of College and University Student Housing, we really do focus very much on a developmental process. We are not here to try to make anyone feel bad or give anyone negative feedback or be high and mighty and try to put people in their place. That is not at all what we want to do. We very much want to see scholarly activity in this field, and we want to see it to be, we want it to be, to have scientific merit and also be applicable to practitioners. And that is a balance. And so all of our reviewers know that, all of our associate editors know that, and we try to work very hard with authors to get you there. If we're at a revise and resubmit, even if that has to happen 3 times, we will do it. We don't have a limit on the number of times we will go through that process. And I have submitted to other journals where if you don't get it corrected and the reviewers like it, after 1 or 2 iterations, they will stop and say this isn't the right place. We don't do that. We try to work with people. If we feel like something is publishable, we will work to try to make that happen. I won't read you here the manuscript criteria, but I did put in the chat, and I'll put it in here again just in case so it doesn't get lost. But if you want to see the criteria for our particular journal and the types of things that we publish, it's there at that link. And then the next slide that Camille has is really just what we publish. And you can see that on the website as well. We publish twice per year in a regular volume, which is any submission. And then we also have a special topic issue that is edited by a team that's not us. It's people who come up with the topic and they go through the whole process of soliciting a call, reviewing and editing manuscripts, and getting that article put together. So I put the topics of the next 2 that we have. We do those in 2-year cycles. So 2022 special issue will be Housing While Black, and 2023 is on staff well-being. And again, all of that you can find on our website. So we have just a few minutes left to open for questions.
Sarah, if I can jump in, one of the things that I think can be really useful to newer writers or people who have written things, but they're not quite sure how to navigate that publication process, is to find a mentor. And I think you will, the folks who are here, I think you'll find that we are the editors as well as other reviewers for the journal, that we are friendly faces when it comes to something like that. If it's just a conversation over Zoom or the phone at some point, I'd be happy to do that. You can find all of the reviewer names and their home institutions on the inside of, it's one of the early pages in the journal. So maybe you can reach out to maybe there's a name that's familiar to you, or maybe it's somebody who is within your region, and you can reach out and say, hey, I know you're an editor, reviewer for the journal. I'm interested in submitting. I wonder if we could talk about what that process is like, right? Don't be afraid to put yourself out there to ask for support. Lots of us are absolutely, in the profession generally, that's what housing and residence life really is, right? It's about support for one another.
There were a number of grad students in this, and I said this to my breakout group. I think one of the best ways for you to be able to write well is that you're doing a lot of reading. And so there's purpose behind the madness of all those articles that Professors Gordon and Davidson assigned to students. But it's just being able to read those because you've become familiar with really good writing and really strong, rigorous research, and then stuff that's not so much. So definitely don't be afraid to be jumping in and reading.
All right, well, thank you all so much. And I know we're at time, but I'm sure our panelists would entertain a question or 2 more if anyone has a question. So I'll just give it a couple more seconds here and let our audience decide. But thank you all for joining us, both our panelists who guide us through this afternoon today and also our attendees. So thank you all for joining us.